your values are not what you think, it's what you do. So many people will think my values are I want somebody traditional, I've got values I want a successful man, or whatever it is. But what do you do in your real world? Who do you actually connect with? Who do you actually reward? Don't base your values on what you think is going on. What do you actually do? Now, if your values are that you reward men who pull away from you, you're always chasing after men, or you're always going for the guy that's super attractive and got lots of girls but then doesn't give you attention, you have to be honest with yourself. Is what do I actually value? Well, I don't value commitment and responsibility from men. I'm actually valuing this. Where people get wrong is they edit their values mentally, but not actually in terms of behavior. So mentally, they'll say they've got all these great values. If you speak to everybody, they'll say, I want this, that, and the other, and they say it well. But try and derive your values as almost do an inventory of your actual behaviors and who you've been rewarding in your past, who have you fallen in love with, what are your patterns, who have you rejected, and that shows you what your values actually are, not what you think they are. Don't airbrush your values just to sound like you're looking for someone great. Who are you actually rewarding? And if you do an inventory of your past relationships and you realize that I've always said no to guys that are actually very kind. I've always been very attached to men that are toxic and, unavailable. I kind of always attached to men who are following a bunch of bikini girls online. And so your values are a bit like they're not consistent. That your values are you're looking for somebody who deprives you of the commitment and connection. Now that you know your value, you can either change it or accept it. But don't delude yourself into thinking you've got the right values when you're in the dating pool, because that will have you confused, because you'll think you're doing nothing wrong and you just can't find the right guy. But it's not that you're doing nothing wrong and you can't find the right guy, it's because you're rewarding the wrong and then assuming you still want the right guy. Hi guys, don't forget to join my Patreon, where not only will you get exclusive information and videos every single week, but not only that, you can ask me a question anytime and there's no limit to how many questions you can ask. So to subscribe, just click the link below. Okay.
So who's to blame if somebody's fat? The fat person or the food industry, microplastics, environment, culture, etc.?
I would say, the porn industry is very much responsible for destroying the masculinity of men and making them unappealing. I would say the porn industry is very much dedicated its life to kind of hijacking children from a very young age and then turning them into addicts by the time they're teenagers, and then turns them into consumers of prostitution as adults. It kind of goes in that order. And so I believe that the porn industry is very much, highly responsible for it. But I also think it's a culture where we've replaced kind of, there seems to be nothing else left for people to feel part of a group anymore. There isn't any male groups the way there used to be. There isn't tribal experiences for men. So their only way to feel the kind of euphoria is now just limited to sex. I don't know if there's as many tribes or is there as many problem solving going on in society. I would imagine when life was more difficult, men would have to be problem solvers, and that kind of boost of ego that you get for every problem you solve is now replaced by technology. So the only boost that's left available is either food or, pornography, or just your basic primitive needs. So I think there is also a lack of just tribes in general, and problem solving. Life is just a bit too comfortable and easy for men and women, but I think it has a more detrimental effect on the psychology of a man when life is too easy and is too comfortable.
That's very interesting and very insightful. I want to pin you down though. If somebody's fat, whose fault is it?
Theirs. Yeah, I think you still have a choice, and your choices can be inhibited by, your the original wounds of your trauma. It can be inhibited by the parents and the role models you've got. Some people are left with really, really bad start to life, so they believe their choices are limited, but doesn't mean their choices actually are limited. So you might have really terrible parents where they just feed you endless rubbish. They are really overweight, so they don't role model how to be, how to be effective. Your school dinners might be unhealthy. I understand all of that. So your choices do get more limited, but there's still a choice. It's limited and it's difficult, but there's still a choice. What would you say?
So this is interesting. I've gone on such a journey with my thoughts on obesity that I have a feeling it mirrors some of the journey that you've been on, but you may be at a midpoint. So here's the journey that I went on. So I grew up in a morbidly obese family, and I was able to escape that. And I was able to escape that by taking just unrelenting control of what I put in my mouth. And so I was like, oh, you can solve this problem. And I used to loop around a very simple idea. There were no obese people in Auschwitz. Now, I know how much that makes people angry, but I needed to run a thought exercise to find out, is this really a thing where some people just can't lose the weight? Or is this really, if you reduce your calories enough, that you will lose fat? Okay, so
genetically,
clearly,
you had there was obesity in your family.
Oh yes.
So there is a predisposition.
100%.
Right. Okay.
So that's where I start, right? Hey, this is just a calorie problem. If you reduce your calories enough, you will lose weight. That is a true statement. And so it's very easy to stop there and say, oh, then you're to blame. I was able to do it and you're to blame. Then I went into, okay, I really do understand that this is extremely hard for people for reasons that are out of their control. So for instance, 100 years ago, virtually nobody grew up fat. So something has happened now to make that a problem. So 100 years ago, virtually nobody would be addicted to pornography. It would just be it existed, but it would be so hard to get a hold of that you're not going to be obese. Calories used to be hard to come by. Food was not engineered by the most brilliant scientists in the world to be literally perfect for triggering you to overeat. They weren't as cheap. And so we really have done things, including just arranging our metabolism by there being microplastics in the food being made from horrendous ingredients, disrupting the microbiome. I mean, just on and on and on. And so as I went through this journey, at first I was like, hey, just eat less. Like, I love you. No, there's no moral judgment, but you really can do this. Then I went to, like maybe people really are stuck and they're just in a terrible system. And now I'm at, you are in a terrible system. You are in a problem, not of your own making, because this would have started when you were a kid and all that, but only you can get you out of this problem. And so that's the message that I want guys to hear. Hey, you're in a bad situation.
Absolutely.
I don't think it was because of your, like, you didn't start the cultural momentum that has led us to this moment. And everything you've detailed, I think, is all accurate. But no one person is to blame for any of that. But they're the only ones that can solve the problem for them.
Exactly.
And so then it starts to get very interesting in terms of how you look at the world and where all of this goes. So, okay, you circle around porn a lot.
A lot.
So what is it about porn? Is it shaping the brain at a young age and then that has knock-on effects? What is it about porn?
It's destroying the selection process of men. It's dehumanizing their selection process, and then they're so devastated when their women have no respect for them, have cheated on them, and left them with all their money, and now lives with their new boyfriend. But they don't realize it all stems from their poor selection, and their poor selection all came from pornography. I did a video recently where I explained that I'll have men who might live in the States or might live in India or something like that, but they are fixated on being with a young Colombian girl or a young Thai girl or a young girl from Ukraine, who's half their age, a quarter of their age, and speaks a completely different language. But they're like, that's my type. And I just thought to myself, I kept hearing it, and I was like thinking to myself, how do you have anything in common with a girl from this culture and doesn't speak the same language and is very young? How is that your type? And he's like, I've just always been attracted to it. And I was like, but then therefore your attraction is based entirely physically and nothing to do with reciprocity. Like, she's also attracted to me, and no other form of connection is important to you. So you have reduced women down to a vagina, and a vagina with a particular color, size, this, that, and the other, and age is now part of it, but that's what you've reduced it down to. That can't happen if you had constant real life experience with women, because you'd learn that women, yes, they're beautiful and they're sexy, but they're also, they're human, they bleed, and they go to the bathroom, and if you live with a woman, that, there's times of the month, there's so many messy, non-sexual things about them that it makes it difficult to attach them purely on sex, because that part of it will always kind of decrease over years. But the fact that they can select purely on that means something has hijacked their preferences, and that's why I think it all boils down to selection. So they will come to me and they'll say, please, I want you to speak to my ex-wife. She's such a gold digger, just like the girls you described. And I was like, okay, tell me a little bit about her. Oh, I met her, she used to be a webcam girl, and we fell in love, and I met her, and she, I left my wife and kids, and then I gave her everything, and then she's so ungrateful. And I said, no, she knows an idiot when she sees one. and she did the exact right thing, I would high five her. If she's found someone dumb enough to leave his wife and kids because you showed a bit of nipple and you're half his age, you deserve everything that comes to you, because the stupidity will get you nowhere in the long run. You got no sympathy from me. Whereas if it was I chose a really good woman, we grew up together, then things that happen and it turned out to go wrong, there's a different level of empathy I have for you, because you went in with the right intentions. But in this case, you didn't go in with the right intentions. I can't reward bad intentions with sympathy. So I digress. But essentially what I would say is it's caused them to completely annihilate good selection when it comes to selecting a partner. And therefore, the family unit is now breaking down.
Going back to the selection process and what pornography is doing to it,
Yeah.
Are you saying that it is a stimuli that is coming to somebody as their brain is developing? Mm-hmm. It creates a hyper, I mean, not to get too fancy here, but a hyper dopaminergic feedback mm-hmm. loop where they're now associating all of their female-focused pleasure around the sexual aspect of a woman.
Exactly. They have only one definition of intimacy left, which is sexual. They don't understand that there's pleasure associated with having a woman that's going to be there when you're in hospital ready with some grapes, or there's a woman, that's going to be home to watch Judge Judy before bed. They're replacing that form of intimacy with only one definition of intimacy: who arouses me the best, who stimulates me the most. They don't actually, their arousal comes purely from one form of intimacy, and they ignore the importance of emotional, intellectual, and spiritual intimacy entirely. And I understand why, because what the porn does is just kind of get their senses in a chokehold. So it's difficult to imagine how nice it is to have a wife that you can walk to the shops with and you have nice conversations on the way back, when you think, I can have this beautiful, supermodel talk to me in any language and take her clothes off. They're like, oh, it's an obvious thing. But to worship vagina over intimacy just seems like, how can we respect men in this generation if this is what they're doing and this is what they're paying for? And they'll deny it. Every single one of them are like, we don't do that, we don't do that. Then why are there billions and billions of streams of pornography? Why is every OnlyFans creator makes more money than most women on this planet? I can say this in a very privileged position. I'm a content creator. No man is ever messaging me saying, here's $10,000, thank you so much, you've helped me. But if I had pictures of my feet online, I would get that all day, every day. So let's just take away the pretense that doesn't happen. It does happen. How do we get rid of it rather than pretending it doesn't exist? Yeah.